It's my pleasure to introduce Jim Thomas, who will be chairing the Warfighters panel. Suffice it to say that Jim is my valued colleague at CSBA. He's Vice President and Director of Studies. I think the easiest thing for me to introduce Jim Thomas is to say that in the 6 years we've been working together and nearly 20 years we've known each other, I've never found a better combination of leader, strategic thinker, and manager. So the panel's in good hands. Jim?
Thanks, Andy. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jim Thomas, as Andy said, Director of Studies at CSBA, and I'm really delighted to moderate this morning's Warfighter Perspectives panel. This session is going to focus on the demand side of the equation, if you will, on the critical challenges facing U.S. warfighters today and the opportunities directed energy and electric weapons in general present for addressing them. The panel is intended to serve as a complement to the technology panel that will follow later this morning that will address the supply side of the equation. Our Warfighter Perspective panel this morning will consider the following questions. What are the major threats DE weapons could help defeat? What new advantages could DE weapons confer? And in particular, how might DE weapons improve cost exchange ratios between attackers and defenders in a missile salvo competition? How might DE weapons shape emerging operational concepts and help the United States to preserve its ability to project power? And finally, how could DE capabilities help to impose costs on potential adversaries? To address these questions, we've assembled a truly excellent panel of senior warfighters to provide their perspectives about directed energy and its potential to revolutionize special operations, homeland and air-based defense, defense for ground maneuver forces, and fleet defense. Leading off to my right will be Lieutenant General Brad Heithold. As you all know, he's commander of Air Force Special Operations Command, former vice commander of U.S. Special Operations Command, and a former commander of the Air Force Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance Agency. Given all of that, he's very familiar with the threats that directed energy defenses could help to address. General Heithold is a master navigator with more than 3,400 hours in AC-130s, MC-130s, and C-130s. General Heithold will be followed by Lieutenant General William Etter, who's currently commander of the continental U.S. North American Aerospace Defense Command Region, 1st Air Force, and is also JFAC for U.S. Northern Command. A command F-16 pilot with more than 3,700 flying hours, he's had an illustrious career in the Air National Guard, culminating in his assignment as assistant to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for National Guard Matters. Lieutenant General Etter is a leading advocate in the Air Force for developing DoD partnership directed energy capabilities that will counter threats to the U.S. homeland. Next on the panel is Brigadier General Promotable Neil Thurgood, the Army's Program Executive Officer for Missiles and Space at Redstone Arsenal in Alabama. He is responsible for development, production, fielding, and life cycle management of the Army's missile and space-related systems, including researching laser technology and its potential for air and missile defense. He began his Army career in the aviation branch, undertaking a number of operational assignments, including with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Finally, we're very pleased to be joined today by Rear Admiral Bryant Fuller. As NAVC Chief Engineer, Admiral Fuller is leading the effort to integrate directed energy and railgun weapons into Navy ships. He is currently in charge of installing the prototype electromagnetic railgun on the joint high-speed vessel USS Millinocket, which will deploy with the railgun next year. He was also a key person in deploying the laser on the USS Ponce in 2013. I will ask each panelist to speak in the order they were introduced for 7 to 8 minutes. We will then open the floor for questions from the audience. Questioners should identify themselves and their affiliation, specify whom they wish to address their question, and keep their questions as brief as possible. We'll begin with General Heithold.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with all of you. So I'm given 7 to 8 minutes, so I don't know where my aid's at, but let me know when I'm at 15, okay? Where are you at? There you go, got it. So listen, thanks, everyone. This is great. Let me start off by telling you how interested we are in these capabilities for special operations. It goes back to when I was lieutenant colonel and I was a defense fellow down at Florida International University, and we had to write a 40-page paper that was publishable, right? My topic was Operation Just Cause and the need for non-lethal weapons. So I studied, I was actually a participant in Operation Just Cause. That goes back to 1989. And what I discovered, if you look at all the Human Watch reports, et cetera, from that operation, where you recall we were going to disrupt the Panamanian Defense Force, get Noriega, come out of there, all's good, right? Well, when you really study that in the use, the gunships were primary players in all of that because of their lethality and their precision, et cetera. If you look at that and you really believe some of the reports that were written from the Human Watch groups, there were a lot of innocents, frankly, more innocents that may have died in that particular operation than should have. So my thesis, frankly, was if we'd have just had non-lethal weapons, active denial weapons, if you were, we could have done that in more precise mode. Part of the operation was to disable the escape mechanisms, i.e. the airplane, the boat, the car, because we had to set the net, the trap, if you will. So we had different ways to disable aircraft. We lost SEALs in disabling that aircraft. They were killed. We could have disabled that aircraft with a high-energy laser pretty easily. But to disable a boat, very, very easily. We had to put SEALs in the water, go underneath the water to tie up the boat. Wouldn't it have been nice to just take the motor out? Wouldn't it have been nice just to burn a beer can size hole in the hood of the car and stopped it? All of the escape mechanism could have been taken out in very few moments. But we had to use rather lethal means to do that. So that was kind of my thesis. I tell you all of that because I'm very, very interested in these capabilities today. Why? Because we do the same things today. Today, our job is a manhunting rule. We must go after high value targets, and lots of times those are individuals. We're going to capture them or kill them. That's our job. Secondly, we rescue hostages. That's our job. Okay? My customer is the enemy. I deliver violence. Okay? It's doses of violence that we're looking for. I already got the high-end violence. That dose is on my AC-130s. What I'm looking for now is how can I deliver that violence, perhaps in a more non-lethal mode, if you will. That's why we're so interested in this technology. So we recognize how far it's come. I was the one that was on the advanced tactical laser on the C-130 that you saw. We moved the ball quite a bit on that. Problem with it, took the whole back C-130. But we learned a lot from that. Now let's take the next step, and let's look at technology and where it's come and apply it on C-130s. Go to the next chart for me. I just got a couple of charts for you. So this is why I'm interested. Achieve and maintain battlefield superiority. Folks, I'm talking about battlefield superiority for 15 minutes. Long enough to get my SEALs ashore, get them to the objective, and back out. So if I can zap the comm node so the spouse doesn't make the cell phone call that causes a reaction force to come in, I can get the person I'm after and get back out. These are no kidding scenarios that we face where we've got them ashore. Unfortunately, the call is made and the reaction force gets there, and I have to pull back. So I got to be able to take the node out, perhaps. I got to be able to take the escape mechanism away. So we still have the requirement to own the battle space for a short period of time. Okay, that's what I mean by that battlefield superiority. We're both interested in defensive and offensive capabilities when it comes to high-energy lasers. I'm putting my battle planes over the objective today. They're called AC-130s. It's getting more and more difficult to defend them in the battle space that we have to operate in. So if I don't do something in the next 5 years or so, the area and times in which I will be able to employ AC-130 gunships continues to shrink. Okay? I must look for new ways of defending the airplane. High-energy lasers offers me that defense against missiles, both IR and RF missile capabilities. So that's number one, and I'll be honest with you, I've shifted my thinking slightly. I used to think offensive first and foremost. After I've talked to my industry partners out here, my thinking's matured to the point where I think defensive, I think it can be actually, a laser can do both. A single laser can be defensive and offensive. But I think we got to think first and foremost a defensive mode so that my airplanes can operate, and then the applications of high-energy lasers for offensive capabilities. So that's what I mean by those words on that slide. Now, secondly, before I leave the slide, active denial weaponry. You know, I've asked the Kirtland labs out there, they've got active denial technologies. Problem with it is I can't reach out far enough with it. Come back and tell me that the physics isn't going to get in the way of applying high-powered microwave energy on a small room, a size target, maybe the size of this, to anywhere smaller, so that I can disperse people. Okay, it's not always, believe it or not, I know you're going to find this very hard to believe, but we're not always going to kill the people in our sights. Sometimes all we want them to do is stop what they're doing. Active denial weapons allows me to do that. and scatter them, disperse them, so that then I can do whatever objective I've got to get or hostages I got to rescue, I can do it. So active denial weaponry is key to all of this as well. If you go to the next slide, I think a picture helps you a little bit. So this is an AC-130. This is our latest one, AC-130J. Note, it's kind of hard to see on this, but you go all the way from the front end nose of this airplane. Notice the sensor capability. Folks, I can tell what color shoes you have on from pretty far distances away. With the technology now on these airplanes is incredible. I can see a lot. Notice the underbelly of it. Look at all the antennas and sensors. I'm feeding a lot of information into this ultimate battle plane. That's what I'm building. I got to be able to see the targets. I carry small diameter bombs. I carry Griffins in the back of this. I carry a rack of 105s. That airplane right where the back crew entrance door is at will have a 105. I'm making it more lethal. So it already has deep magazines. It has laser-guided precision strike. It has the ability to see. It has the ability to command and control. It's an ultimate battle plane over the objective. I've got to be able to defend it over the objective for a short period of time. The next step, if you notice the words in the bottom, Block 10. I put the aircraft in a block configuration. Eric Forsyth here, my colonel down at SOCOM, is leading this effort and doing a wonderful job, I might add. He's moved the ball almost across that spectrum. We're at Block 30 already. I fielded a couple Block 10s. Block 20 is being fielded. I'm getting the 105 on the aircraft. I'm moving across that spectrum of capabilities till you get to Block 60. And Block 60, ladies and gentlemen, that's not 10 years out. Block 60 is a couple years out. Okay, this isn't a 20-year plan, frankly. This is more like a 5-year plan. Airplanes are already being assembled and being built right now today in Northwest Florida as we build these airplanes out. We'll build 37 of them. Somebody asked a question about how many. 37 aircraft that will be developed into this configuration. Not all of them will be Block 60 airplanes. Some of them will have the high-energy laser active denial capabilities on them. We'll mix the fleet accordingly, is the plan. Unless I find the room to put this capability on all of them, but right now the plan is to have X number of Block 60 aircraft. So that's the plan, is to build the ultimate battle plane that can fight its way to the objective, stay on the objective for a period of time, and fight its way out. That's what we do. Okay, so that's our plan with regard to that high-energy capabilities. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll be prepared to answer your questions.
Thank you. General Etter.
Thanks, Jim. What I'd like to do is briefly discuss directed energy in the context of my primary mission set, which is Homeland Defense. I'm the Joint Force Air Component Commander for U.S. Northern Com, the JFAC. This is the AOR here in America. The one we're sitting in right now also has many similarities to CENTCOM, EUCOM, and every other geographic combatant command, but the Homeland also has all forces not committed overseas. Between being the homeland and the home base, there's plenty to protect. I'm here because I believe directed energy brings us to the dawn of an entirely new era in defense. Why? Because directed energy has the potential to deliver proportional and accurate effects, both lethal and non-lethal, against a broad spectrum of threats, and may be able to do it for a lot less expensively. The capabilities of directed energy should be described as revolutionary, not evolutionary. Let me give you a quick historical example, the Spencer repeating rifle. Although it was produced in relatively small quantities during the Civil War, it changed the nature of the battles it was employed in to include Gettysburg. Only the Union had it because it was invented in New England. But both Union and Confederate leaders thought that had the Spencer rifle been introduced in large numbers, it would have greatly shortened the Civil War. The vast majority of Civil War soldiers used single-shot muzzle loaders, which at best could load 3 times a minute, whereas the Spencer rifle could fire 24 rounds a minute. So you ask, how come the Union didn't produce more Spencer rifles? Well, only 60,000 were delivered compared to the 2 million muzzle loaders. A big reason was not understanding what they had. They did not understand what they had in their hands. The leaders thought that the Spencer rifle could perhaps waste ammunition because it could fire rounds so fast. Think about that. History, to include the Spencer repeating rifle, has some lessons to teach us about how revolutionary innovations like directed energy can be hampered without an appreciation for their capability and developed in a spirit of collaboration. Directed energy is no longer the realm of science fiction. Have you heard from General Harris? The Air Force has been testing this for 40 years. The Navy has it on boats now. The Army is taking shots at White Sands. We can do this. We can also know that we're moving the ball forward. Some great work from the research lab at the Air Force Research Lab of Directed Energy Directorate. Credit for progress on directed energy also needs to go to industry partners also. The Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisitions, Dr. LaPlante, remarked at the spring meeting of the Air Force Association that it's critically important for industry and the military, the services, to get together and partner. And you've already heard this, that's pretty much what we're looking to do here. We need to partner to move the ball forward here. This is one of the great things about events like this, because it allows us to compare notes and exchange ideas. And I always tell people, when I go to a conference, my best work is done in the hallway. And I think that's true. Collectively, this is probably one of the most informed bodies ever assembled in the U.S. about directed energy. So how does innovation occur? It occurs because of the intellectual back and forth that the forums like this provide. So this is a warfighting panel on directed energy, so I want to state my view plainly. Directed energy systems, whether high-powered microwave or laser, have the obvious and direct application for defending our nation from aerial attack. I firmly believe that. We in DoD are concerned about potential collateral damage everywhere in the world, and as you can imagine, especially here in the homeland. We may have to defend against an asymmetric attack to include an airliner or an unmanned system, or symmetric attacks like a cruise missile. To complicate the problem set, right here in DC, there's a 30-mile ring that the FAA has called the SIFRA, Special Rules Flight Area, and at this time of day, there's over 100 airplanes in that 30-mile ring. So do we know who everybody is? And if we thought one of those airplanes was attacking us, could we prosecute that attack and not harm the other 99? These are the type of questions we hope to flesh out and be able to figure out. But we need to figure that out together. That means we take a blended and layered approach to the air defense of this nation and to the national capital region. This approach currently involves ground-based assets, airborne assets we have for fighters supported by AWACS and tankers, and command and control nodes we have on the East Coast, West Coast, and at NORAD locations. Directed energy has the potential to extend those air defense layers and push our defensive rings out to distances we never believed possible. Directed energy also has the capability to give us a day-night all-weather capability with improved reliability, and we need the day-night all-weather because we don't know the time or the place of an attack that could come on the nation. Right now, I can refuel in the air, but I cannot rearm in the air. So it's critically important to be able to have more than 2, 4, or 6 rounds available to come off an airplane or a ground-based station to engage a target. In the last few years, we've been worried about the anti-access area denial environment our potential enemies are building against us. What are we doing to complicate their situation? Directed energy has the ability to more precisely and scalably take an approach to A2AD environment in this country. We've been making rapid progress on the detection side of the air defense equation, but we still have about the same weapons that we had on 9/11 for our air defense fighters. I'm certain the time is now to move beyond. So when I was going to do this brief, my exec came up to me and said, "Hey, do you need your laser pointer?" Okay. So this is about $6. It's got this danger laser radiation right on here. I think mass production and economy can change the equation. If we can put this in something the size of a pen, we certainly can figure this out. Directed energy has the potential to give the warfighter both kinetic and non-kinetic options as threat. And as General Highhold explained, we don't always want to kill something, we just want to stop its behavior. I don't always need to bring an airplane down, I need to turn it around sometimes is good enough. So that's the promise of directed energy, but there's still a lot of questions on the policy side that have to be answered. Do we allow just anybody to fly any type of air machine? You saw in the news last week an 18-year-old in Connecticut was able to weaponize a UAV. Is that allowed? If they're not allowed, are we going to engage them? And if we engage them, what risk and what ROE will we use? Can we only engage them to turn them around, or can we actually use deadly force? These are the policy questions that are very, very tough. And anybody who works and breathes and lives DC knows this is actually perhaps the harder side of the equation than the technology part. But we need to get through that. Cost is always a concern for the military budget, but especially so in today's world. My goal, where possible, is to have directed energy to plug into our existing air defense system. I've already got an entire enterprise. I have detection, I have radar, I have communication, I have weapons platforms. Let's not reinvent the wheel. I don't think we can afford to do that. If we build something, it needs to be able to talk to the same language and communicate with our architecture that we already have. Another question that would be very good to have is we think it's cheaper to have a directed energy shot than a missile, but is it really? So we need to flesh out some of those questions, and we need folks like you to help us do that. How about the danger of shooting a directed energy shot? So if an aircraft is approaching, I know what a clear field fire is for my missile. What I don't know is if I shoot against this target with a directed energy and it misses, does it go all the way to the moon? These are the type of the technological questions that I know people in this room know the answer to, and that we can all work through this here together. If we take this shot, if there's someone on the ground with a pacemaker, is that in effect? Remember, directed energy is not just laser, it's also microwave. And we need to make sure that we just don't think about just the laser part of it. It's directed energy, and we need to use the entire spectrum. I believe the answer to these questions can be found through the continued collaboration and innovation with the joint community, the Department of Defense as a whole, with our industry partners, and with our congressional leaders. As the JFAC, I would like kinetic and non-kinetic, lethal and non-lethal directed energy options that I can use from fixed sites, mobile sites, and from our current air defense aircraft. I need smart folks like you to all gather here to help me figure out if we can both technologically and economically achieve that goal. So I'll end as I started. Directed energy brings us to the dawn of an entirely new era and represents a revolution in defense that I'm excited to be part of. Thanks for your time, and I look forward to answering your questions later.
Thank you, General. General Thurgood.
Great, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing us to come and participate today. Appreciate the industry partners that are here and all the great work that's been done, as several have indicated, over several decades of effort. I think most of us believe that we're at that tipping point in time when lasers need to be operationalized, and they need to move from the labs and the promises that are made for many, many decades to actual operational capability. And from an Army perspective, that's very much in the forefront of our programs. We already have requirement documents written for lasers in the Army. We have the Indirect Fire Protection Program, which is an air defense program. Lasers is actually written into the Block 3 program. We're trying to actually accelerate that into the next 2 or 3 years to get something in the hands of soldiers to operate in the battle space. As a matter of fact, this year, in conjunction with the science and technology community, the Army under Ms. Mary Miller, SMDC under Lieutenant General Mann, and our office, we're going to have a laser live fire at White Sands Missile Range. We invited industry to come out. We had several industry partners who were interested. So we're going to go there shoot, and we expect that following that, we'll move forward with some limited capability that we can provide to our soldiers. So this is very much in the Army's forefront of their plan and the requirements and the doctrine that they need to move forward with. It's an interesting construct at the end of the day when we talk about the application of lasers. And let me offer a few thoughts that might be worth pursuing in your labs and how this might be operationalized for a soldier. So the fight in the Army happens at the brigade command level, the brigade combat teams. We call that the forward battle edge. And so one of the questions you have to ask ourselves is, can we get a laser the size of that pointer that a soldier can carry and do something with? Not the size of a truck or a plane. And then the next question is, who do we allow and authorize to actually shoot that weapon? Because as it was just mentioned by General Etter, it doesn't just stop when you shoot. It doesn't stop when you hit the target. There's some amount of laser light in the air from the time you stop shooting until the target's destroyed. Where does that laser light go? And if I'm in an air-to-air fight with a jet, where does that laser go when they don't hit the target? because it's not going to command detonate, it's not going to stop at a certain distance. So those are some really pointed questions that operationally we have to get our hands around. When we talk about the counter-UAS fight, we just mentioned the great demonstration that the young man did on YouTube. There are many like that. And so if that's out there, how do we do clearance of fires from the ground to space? What systems do we have in place? As General Etter also mentioned, we have this tremendous command and control process in place now that we've invested a lot of dollars in. So how do we tie that, lasers into that? How do I use our ground-based radars, our airborne radars, collectively to see the target and to use the mechanism, a kill mechanism, in this case a laser, to engage the target? And who has the authority to actually squeeze that trigger, and at what level does that happen? And so when you consider a ground-to-air shot versus an air-to-air shot or a ground-to-air or air-to-ground shot, those are very different scenarios. And the ability of a laser to be informed and the technology to be informed by that operational impact is tremendous for us. And so the Army's working very hard in our labs right now and in our schools at Fort Sill under the direction of Major General Rossi to get the doctrine and the tactics, techniques, and procedures correct, because I think we're at that tipping point that I mentioned earlier where technology is no longer the problem. We know how to do this. We know how to get it small enough to get it on a platform that a soldier can use. Scalability is critical. If you want to move from the asymmetric fight all the way up to the full spectrum fight, the material answer to those kind of fights is modularity, scalability, and adaptability. And so if I want to have a laser that a soldier can carry, a special operations soldier can use and to defend their location, if I want to have a full spectrum fight where I'm defending an airfield or a homeland defense scenario from a full spectrum fight, those are different capabilities. But if I modularize those and scale those from the individual to the collective, then we can actually do and execute the joint fight from the joint kill chain from a soldier all the way through the Navy, through the Air Force, through the space programs. And of course, the second piece of that is the aerial denial piece that we talked about earlier. Having been the recipient of those microwaves, I can tell you it actually does work. It's highly motivating. And it will actually cause the behavior of the individual to change instantaneously without thought. And so those capabilities will help us in not only the asymmetric fight, where we need to preserve and protect life, and also in the full spectrum fight, where we need to control and channelize and canalize what we need our enemy and our threat to do, or perhaps what we need to move our civilian population, which we're trying to protect, out of an area so we can do more of a kinetic operation. And then, of course, my battle buddy here to the right, Brian, is going to talk about the Railgun. And so we're watching very closely with the Railgun and what it can do and what it can provide. The speed at which it can engage and regenerate firepower is very important to us. And so from an Army perspective, we're actually all in on lasers. We're actually trying to move forward as quickly as we can. I suspect that once we do this live fire demonstration in November this year at White Sands, we'll continue to partner with our SMDC partners who have a great program, DARPA who has a great program, and of course our industry partners who have their own individual research and development programs. The combination of those three things, I think we're at, which has created a tipping point where we can actually operationalize and get this in the hands of soldiers that's at a usable size that allows BCT commander to operate them on the battle space and to allow the command and control systems to make the shoot decision at the appropriate level at the appropriate time. And with that, I'll turn it over to my counterpart and wait for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Again, thanks for the opportunity to come out and address this forum today. Look forward to the opportunity to exchange some ideas and learn some things. So as the others have said, I really do believe we're on the cusp of a new era as far as what we can do with direct energy. So the Navy, we are accelerating really down two paths, both the laser and the electromagnetic railgun path. And we're pretty excited about where we're at and where we're going in the near future. As mentioned earlier, we've got a 30 kW laser actually deployed right now on USS Ponce out in the 5th Fleet AOR. It's been there almost a year. I think in September, we went operational last September on the Ponce. The whole objective of putting the 30 kW laser, so it can augment the self-defense functions of the Ponce, so it can do counter small boat, counter UAV type stuff. And a big thing we're getting out of it as well is ISR and maritime domain awareness, if you could. So it's been very good. The whole objective of that, though, is to take something at sea and do it quickly, and take it from something that a room full of PhD scientists have to go operate, maintain, and utilize, to something that a small handful of sailors can actually operate at sea, and it can survive in the harsh environment that we have at sea. And again, Persian Gulf's a pretty harsh maritime environment to be in. So we've been really happy with the success we've got out of the laws that we've got on Ponce right now. So we've learned a lot. Operational reliability has been good. We've learned a lot in operating environment, and the sailors are continuing to learn how to use it more effectively. The plan was it was supposed to stay out there for a year, so this September we were supposed to go and take it off. 5th Fleet liked it so much, they said, can we keep it longer? So right now the plan is out FY17 or longer, really as long as the Ponce is out there on station. We plan to keep the 30 kW laws out on board. So that's been really good. And again, the whole thing was get it in the hands of sailors, get it at sea, operate it, and learn what we can do. In the meantime, we're also working with ONR on this. Our solid state laser tech maturity is coming down the line. Sometime in the very near future, we're going to award a development contract for a 100 to 150 kW laser, which we will go do an at-sea demo and around FY18. So lasers are going well down the path. We're looking good on that. On the railgun side, we've kind of got a dual track on the railgun side as well. So there's multiple components that really make up the railgun system, and the first is the hypervelocity projectile, HVP. So we're also going down parallel paths with HVP. We're looking to put it on our conventional munitions, our powder guns, and be able to fire those out of our 5 inches, and also look at the projectile out of the railgun. So the big thing the HVP does for you, one, its geometry is such that it's good for hypersonic flight. We're working on the ability to be able to steer it, give it GPS capability, and also to close the fire control loop on that. And that's we're working with OSD and SCO as far as development of that part. So HVP is running in parallel with what we're doing on the railgun. So we've had a railgun manual load version down at actually several versions that we've used at Dahlgren over several years, and we've got hundreds of shots now that we've been able to get out of that manual load. We're in the process right now of developing a rep rate version of the railgun. In FY16, we're going to take the manual load version, put it on JSHV, which was talked about earlier, and do an at-sea demo. It's really going to operate, again, it's going to be manual load, and it's going to go in a naval support fire type scenario. And again, the objective is get it to sea, see how it operates in the marine environment, and kind of put it through its paces with the train, elevate, launcher type stuff. In parallel, so we're working on the rep rate, and the plan is right now in around the FY19 time frame to put a rep rate version at sea on a demonstrator, and figure out again how do we integrate it with the ship. That's part of our challenge right now. Is there's technology that we've got to mature both in the launcher barrel, in the HVP, and then how do we integrate with the fire control? And then as we install these things on ships, integration within the ship. One of the challenges we have will be the power integration, the power conditioning, and power integration part of the system, the cooling and such, and the fire control side. We've got numerous feasibility studies we're doing as well to go figure out what's the best platform to initially put this thing on sea. DDG-51 has been suggested, DDG-1000. In fact, we're just wrapping up a feasibility study. We'll be briefing the Navy leadership here soon on the feasibility of installing on DDG-1000 as well. So the bottom line is we're very excited to be involved with directed energy at this point in time. It really is going to be able to augment our existing kinetic kill capability as far as missiles. It will definitely help us get on the other side of the cost equation to be able to defend against some of the high-end threats that are out there, and it will again, augment the systems we have right now and make our defense capability more complete. So standing by, looking forward to questions from the audience.
I want to thank all of our distinguished speakers. I think this is an excellent overview of various warfighting perspectives across the Joint Force. With that, we'll now open it up for questions. Mr. Friedberg?
Sidney Friedberg, Breaking Defense. Thank you, gentlemen. The question I had, there's a whole range of functions here, and we will probably get to different ones at different points as we evolve. Higher power lasers actually can fit in platforms we already have. So from your perspectives, as we go from a laser that can dazzle sensors to a laser that can shoot down a near soft drone to one that actually can do missile defense against cruise missiles, or to shoot down a manned aircraft, perhaps all the way to something that actually can do a kill of a ballistic entry vehicle, which is a pretty hard heat-resistant target. Where on that spectrum does it become useful in different ways for your organizations? How does the potential evolve as the technology evolves to take on those different missions at different power levels?
Yeah, so let me take a first shot at that. I believe of all the missions we just talked about for use of high-energy lasers, the air-to-ground mode, of which is applicable to the mission I have, which is danger, close air support. Frankly, in the vehicles that I fly, which have the room and performance characteristics, it is relatively easy to give up 5,000 to 10,000 pounds of weight to this effort, give the space to this effort on the aircraft. I have the energy on the aircraft, 60, 90 generators times 4. There's a lot I can do, sensor capability, there's a lot of room. So I think the right approach to this is, as mentioned several times in the forum already, let's stop talking about it. I'll carve out an AC-130, I've got one. I'll carve it out, I'll put it on a ramp, we'll put orange wires on it, we'll dedicate it to the effort, industry, bring the solutions, we'll put it on there and let's get moving. And then you go from there. But we've got, I think first step we got to do in our Air Force is let's take that first step and let's prove we can do it air to ground. And then I think it evolves, Sydney, into the other more difficult mission sets, which are supersonic flight and some of the other characteristics. I think air to ground from a platform that's relatively has the space weight that we can give up for this effort. That's where I would believe we are to begin our efforts. And frankly, that's the discussions with inside the Air Force, at least at my levels, and some of the folks I've talked to, include the chief, is that might be where we start, Brad, is you've got the platform. So that's what I would say to that.
So certainly we're on the other side of the equation. Fighters don't have 5,000 pounds and
Right.
5 cubic yards to give up. So it'll be a little more difficult. But what we could do to start early on is get into the microwave side of the equation and the ID. And when you ID something, you don't necessarily harm it. So I think we could do that at low risk and very soon. And I'd like to do that yesterday.
So I'll just add to two thoughts to that. So the first thought is, there's a reason we have different mechanisms to do kinetic operations. So the analogy to that is, if I want to shoot a mortar, I don't need to shoot that with a high-end missile. I can shoot that with a lower-end kinetic kill. So if you bleed that across into the laser domain, I don't need a 100 kilowatt laser to kill a mortar round or a small UAS. I might need a 150 watt laser to kill a cruise missile, depending on the distance I want to kill it. So I'm not sure that, I don't think you need one laser that can do everything, because that's why it needs to be scalable, modular, adaptable, right? So I can use them from an asymmetric perspective all the way up to full conflict spectrum. So I think we have to move forward with what we can as quickly as we can. And I mentioned earlier this demonstration we're going to do. So we actually sent an RFI out to industry earlier this year. Bring what you have. Here are the rules. It must come on something that moves. Donkey, wagon, truck, trailer, we don't care. And you must be able to kill a mortar and a UAS. And so of all the industry partners, one responded that said they could do it in November this year. So we're with exactly that concept. Let's get what we have out there. I don't need to wait to 100-watt laser or 150-watt laser that can kill everything. Let's start with a capability that I can use and modularize it and build it over time. And then the second the piece of that is, as we continue down this path, whether it's directed energy or in terms of microwaves, lasers, or railguns, you really got to put that into the existing constructs that we've invested in from a DoD perspective. So if we're going to do national defense here in the homeland, then there's a whole defense structure that's in place. You got to feed into that defense structure. What we don't need is a laser system or a directed energy system that's standalone by itself, not connected to anything. It's got to feed into the process, and it's got to be user friendly enough that you can tie it in directly and quickly to the existing structures.
So in the Navy, we've got a bit of advantage over our friends in the Air Force and the Army. Our platforms are a little bit larger, got a little more margin from space weight, power, and cooling. So again, what capability? So we've got 30 kW deployed right now on Ponce, and that will counter a small boat or a small UAV. It's, just go to YouTube and you can see all the videos of our 30 kW laser in action. So again, depends on what you want. Now, obviously, as you scale up the power, you get more lethality and you can take on more challenging type targets. So obviously 150, which we're working on right now, will bring you a different set of targets that you can engage in. And obviously if you get above 150, then that'll open up the other spectrum. The big thing is to get it integrated. Go back with what Neil said there, is how you integrate it. So again, Ponce, we've got it integrated with our close-in weapon system, so that gives the initial queuing to get the targeting system, if you would, of the 30 kW laser on target. After that, the optics take over. But again, the whole range of stuff you can get, the optics that we've got on our laser are pretty good. And we've learned a lot that we can do with that, because we can ID tail numbers off airplanes basically at 20 miles because the optics are that good. So, but it has to be integrated. It's your fire control system, your power integration. Part of the challenge with lasers right now is the efficiency. 30 kW takes you in excess of 100 kW of power to power it up, and then you got the coolant. So obviously, as we scale up the power, then that's going to require more power. So we'll have to integrate that in. Energy storage. Batteries, obviously is one way to help buffer that as well, and we can integrate that in with our ship power systems. But the whole thing is, what do you want it to do? If you want to do small UAVs and small boats right now, okay, 30 kW is adequate, and we've got that capability today. You want to go for more aggressive cruise missiles or some more aggressive AAW targets, okay, that's a different set. Again, different level of integration within your combat systems, and increased power levels as well. But we're definitely on the path.
Next question over here, Otto.
The railgun, what kind of rates are you looking at? There's always the problem of the barrel overheating and wearing out from the energy shot. What kind of rate do you want to get?
So we're looking at about 10 rounds a minute is what we're looking for. And obviously, you're right. Thermal management of that is really key. I mean, obviously, you got two aspects you got to worry about. One, to contain the repulsive forces over time, and then manage the thermal energy that's coming out from each shot. But 10 rounds a minute is what the objective is right now.
Okay. And the other one is you talked about using it, the laser on a Ponce for ISR.
Yep.
You mentioned that reading the tail a number on an aircraft at a certain distance. What else are you making that using it for ISR?
Well, anything you can see, right? Because the optics are very, very good. So basically, it just allows you to see a lot better. A lot better than you can see with binoculars such that. So that's the big thing, and you can precisely point it where you want it to go, and track a target at a distance as well. So it's optics.
Question for General Etter. You're talking about using HPM as an identification tool. Isn't that just a form of radar, or do I have the concept wrong? And is the HPM you're looking at somehow sort of related to what Raytheon was doing with Vigilant Eagle some years back?
So let me answer that in reverse. I'm not familiar with the Vigilant Eagle, so I can't speak to that. But when you say as another form of radar, perhaps we need to think of these as just another system. Just as we don't want to bring something completely separate, as the general stated, using microwave for an ID is just another spectrum of radar, another spectrum of optical. We need to have all of these tools in our toolkit. So if we try 3 methods and we get 100% success on one, we're good. But on any given day, there's different considerations with the atmosphere, there's different considerations with jamming that may or may not work. So we need this as an additional way to get an ID. In some cases, this may be able to get us an ID much further out, which allows us to make decisions farther out and not at the last second. I hope that answers your question.
Next question.
Might I ask the status of the discussion of a ground-based railgun?
I guess that would be me.
The ground guy.
Yeah, so right now the Navy has the lead on the railgun system. And so the Fire Center, my counterpart, the Fire Center guy, a good friend of mine, Brigadier General Chris Spillman, was just out at Dugway shooting the railgun. And so we're working on the doctrine of TTPs that go with that. We see that as part of our air defense structure. So in the Army piece of that, we have the lower tier. So at the SRBM level, that's where we interface with the upper tier. So we have our overlapping boundaries in the SRBM level. And so we see that as an air defense structure. And it really gets to the questions of how do I get more rounds quicker? How do I get them a little bit further and quicker to the target, which means I can intercept it further out from the defended area. And then, of course, reducing the cost of kill is always going to be an area of interest. So the Navy has a lead on it. We're a follower service right now, and that's how we see it moving forward.
It is a parallel path because OSD, Strategic Capabilities Office, the SCO office, is really funding the fire control side of the loop, if you would. So the railgun, the land-based railgun, we still, in order to make it effective in the missions that Neil's talking about, we need to be able to steer the HVP, and we need to be able to close the fire control loop. So from that standpoint, the railgun is the railgun, and the projectile is really agnostic about how it gets into flight, right? So it is actually very closely linked, and it's going in parallel. So what we're working with the Army and with OSD SCO is to work out the fire control side of the HVP so it can do the more challenging air missions, if you would. But it's closely related.
James Drew for Flight Global. Could I ask the Air Force guys, have any of these discussions about airborne lasers been directed towards future bomber acquisitions and possible systems on next generation bomber? And also for the Navy, are you looking at any airborne laser weapon systems, or are you going to wait for the Air Force to take the charge on that and then grab those systems as they come online?
So I think the answer to that is any and all technologies that could enhance both the lethality and survivability of the next generation bomber are being considered. It would be hard to believe there's not some role for directed energy in the next generation bomber. It may not be on the very first one produced, but it will certainly be there.
I'm not aware of anything that NavAir may be doing on the air side. We're strictly right now focused on the shipboard side.
Hi, Megan Eckstein with U.S. Naval Institute News. My question is primarily for Admiral Fuller. The other panelists have mentioned the idea of learning how to employ laser weapons, who is allowed to make the shots, different things. What has the Navy learned from the Ponce deployment, and what do you still need to continue to learn through that in the Joint High-Speed Vessel deployment next year? Okay, so that's a great question. Actually, that's one of the things I meant to talk about when I was doing my intro there. One of the things that was good as we worked it through the 30 kW laser that we've put on Ponce was it didn't matter if it had been a 3,000 kW. We had to go through the same policy with OSD. So we had to go through all the policy development, all the TTPs, all the ROE, and the CONOPS that you would have no matter what the laser was. So we have worked all, and that was a big part. Actually, that was probably more challenging in some areas than the technology coming through that. So we worked all that through with OSD. We got all the policies in progress, got the ROE. So we can use that again. So the next laser comes out, be it 150 kW or whatever it is, same policy. We'll have to go through the same process, but we've already blazed that trail. And so we've done that.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
With all the advances in DE technology that have been discussed this morning, I was wondering, are there efforts with regards to protecting personnel from both from an occupational environmental health standpoint, users, maintainers, and for those who are injured, either from an occupational environmental standpoint or recipients of offensive laser capabilities of other adversaries, diagnosing and treating such injuries?
So I can just mention from the Army perspective, as we develop the weapons platforms in the life cycle management process that we do from a program executive office perspective, then all of the logistics piece, the handling piece, the training piece, all of that associated with the technologies that are related to laser or directed energy or railgun are all part of that decision process. So the answer to that question is yes. In terms of, from a ground force perspective, or a low-flying, helo perspective, I'm not sure that we're as far along as we might need to be in terms of how we protect ourselves from the same capability. We have lots of limited capability now based on low-power lasers. I think there's some work to be done on that side, on the high-power laser side.
Yeah, that was part of, as we came through the policy and getting authorization to actually employ the laser on Ponce, we came through some of that. And certainly, we did a hazard assessment for our sailors and operators as we deploy the weapons. So the answer to that is yes, at least on the operational side, and I'm not sure on the defensive side what we have done in that area of it.
Well, this is a great start to our morning session. I think it's a terrific tee-up for our technology panel that's going to follow later today. I think you got a clear sense of the urgency from a warfighter perspective about these technologies and the enthusiasm as we look ahead. So please join me in thanking our distinguished panel this morning.